Et nous arrivons dans la deuxième phase émission. Et nous côté que nous allons recevoir un invité qui est déjà avec nous sur le panel là. Et ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor and privilege to introduce a distinguished individual who's running for the esteemed position of justice with a profound dedication to upholding the law and ensuring justice for all. I just want to say a good evening to Mr. Sykes. Sykes. How are you today?
Thank you, Rutherford. I do appreciate the intro. Yes, my name is Vince Sykes, and as you indicated, I am running for judge for the village of Spring Valley. I do want to thank you for having me here tonight, or this evening, should I say, and I also want to thank Groove FM Radio for, inviting me onto the radio show this evening.
All right. Throughout this interview, I want to make sure that you're pretty relaxed. All right. So because we are about to cover some various, let's say various topics, basically that provide some insights. Okay.
Ready to go.
All right. So the first basically will entail regarding your background experience. Okay. Why don't you tell us about yourself?
So I'm actually a practicing attorney. I have my own law practice. I've always had an office on Main Street in Spring Valley. My office address is 95 North Main Street, Spring Valley. I've been practicing for over 12 years in Spring Valley. Right out of law school, and law being sort of like a second career for me. But right out of law school, I started my own practice. I handle a lot of immigration cases, civil rights cases, personal injury cases. I've represented thousands of clients in the Spring Valley community over the years. I looked the other day at my client folders, and I have over 1,000. I'm approaching 2,000 folders.
Were you impressed?
I was actually surprised because that's a lot of cases. But it's over a period of about 12 years, over a decade.
Okay, that's good.
So I'm a fixture within the community. People may listen. Of course, if you don't have a case for a lawyer, you're not necessarily going to know me from that perspective. But I'm low keyed. I like to focus on my work. I like to,
that's pretty.
Get in a court and make my argument. So I'm not really the political type of person. So, but as we get into the questions, I'll explain to you why I decided to run and so on and so forth.
So what inspired you to pursue a career in law, basically?
That's a good question. My first pursuit and my first career is actually engineering.
Oh, really?
So I graduated with a bachelor's of engineering undergrad.
Okay.
I've always wanted
Which
to do
field?
electrical engineering.
Are you serious?
Yeah. That's my background. And I actually worked in for Cisco Systems. I worked in Silicon Valley for many years.
Okay.
I did a lot of what we call, data communications.
Okay.
What we call networking.
Gateways, firewall.
I'm probably at the forefront of all of that from a hardware perspective. And, we did product design. I was very much into it. So from a young age, I wanted to be an engineer. But see, as I progressed further in my career, I realized I wasn't really getting this self-gratification. As a person, I like helping people out. I began to realize it doesn't matter how fast you can, transmit data or receive data.
So how was the transition, though, like from engineering
it was tough.
Okay.
It was not an easy transition because I worked throughout. As I was in law school, I continued to work full time. But the transition from the personal gratification, in law as I took it on, I enjoy it. It's my passion. I love helping people out. I love taking on cases. I love fighting for the underdog, rooting for, those without a voice. So yeah, this is my field, and this is my passion.
I'm really intrigued, basically, by your experience, and also the fact that you are an engineer as well. So, being an engineer and attorney, simultaneously, that clearly shows there is you're well versed in whatever you basically will touch. So there are more cases that will be able to be resolved in a short while or in a blink of an eye by your way of thinking or the way of of perceiving things. So that's a plus, and I really like that.
Yeah, I think it gives me a different perspective.
Yep.
And in law, I think other knowledge from other industries is actually relevant and useful. But besides my engineering degree, my law degree, I also have an MBA. I have a master's in business administration from Pepperdine University in Malibu, California. But as a judge, judges take on all kinds of cases.
Yes, definitely.
It could be an insurance case. It could be a personal injury, medical malpractice case. So having experiences in other industries, it really is an advantage if you're a judge.
To have a critical look.
Exactly.
Exactly. Okay. So, what have prepared you basically for you to serve as a judge?
Well, as I said, my experience is my background. You know, I handle cases.
Okay.
You know, if you're on the bench and lawyers come before you, cases come before you, right? There's a question as to whether you have the experience. It's one thing to know the law from reading books.
Yeah.
There's another thing to having practiced the law, represented clients. You've experienced wins, you've experienced losses. You understand the process of bringing in evidence. And listen, some of these cases are close. Some cases are a slam dunk. It you know, whatever. There's video that shows defendant doing whatever. Or, you know, in a civil litigation, it's clear that there was a contract, someone breached the contract. Some cases are close, but I refer you to, for instance, the Supreme Court. They always split.
Yeah.
So it means they're dealing with a complicated case that they all cannot agree on. Those cases where it's tight and typically you're going to find a split. It means one judge could rule this way, another judge could rule a different way. Those are the cases where you really want to make sure that judge has the experience, so they can arrive at the proper, decision.
Approach. Okay. So I usually like saying to myself, like, I see, I forget. Once I see basically like the subject, I start remembering. Once I do it, I totally understand. So, are there any cases, basically, or legal work that you're most proud of, and why?
I would say my civil rights cases, discrimination cases.
Okay.
Because these are cases where most lawyers won't take on such cases because they're very difficult. You're going into federal court, claiming, the cause of action being discrimination, and it's an uphill battle. But those cases, because those cases bring so much, relief and true justice to the victims, those who have been discriminated against, or I did a police excessive force case, and we settled. It was in federal court, but those are the kinds of cases that I'm exceptionally proud of, because I know those are the cases that a lot of lawyers won't take. So you have victims that have no recourse. They've gone to lawyer after lawyer after lawyer. No one wants to take the case, and they're feeling the hurt. When I represented my client, I know this guy was devastated. That left a huge impact on him, negative impact. I could tell. Psychologically, he had experienced something that he wished he never had been involved in the first place.
Okay.
Right.
So, like, whenever you get a chance, basically, I want to let you know that you feel free to stop me, and anytime that you want to explain, you want to give an anecdote. Sure. Okay. Sure. So, like, have you ever been retaliated by trying to resolve those cases?
No. I mean, we are bound by professional rules of conduct. Judges also have judicial ethical rules that they have to comply and abide by. No, the court environment is always one of respect. It's always one of, lawyers I've worked with have, we could be on opposite sides, but there's true respect for your colleagues. And I've never really experienced anything negative where I would say someone tried to retaliate, or it's just never happened to me. Yeah.
So, which means that you have your own philosophy. Can you please elaborate, explain to the audience, how would you describe your judicial philosophy? When I say that, for instance, by discussing a landmark case that you believe best exemplify your judicial philosophy.
Sure.
And explain why.
Sure. My philosophy is that, and I'll explain it from my perspective as a practicing attorney. I have to be completely forthcoming with my client. And similarly, even in the court environment, I have to be forthright with evidence that I have. We share evidence between colleagues or between sides. So I try to uphold a very high sense of integrity in my practice and in the work that I do. I won't take a case if I don't believe that I can achieve the goal or the outcome that my client is looking for. And my client is entitled to have whatever goal or outcome that they believe in or they feel they're entitled to. I counsel my clients over and over again if I feel maybe they're seeking something that is almost impossible, or maybe the law just doesn't provide that type of a remedy. But at the end of the day, if the client says this is what I'm looking for, and if I feel that there's just no way I'll be able to achieve that, I won't take the case. So if I take a case, I'm committed. I'm going all the way from beginning to end. And it raises another question, one of, as a lawyer, I know there are many lawyers that don't want to go to trial because they just don't have that experience. So I take a case, I always say to myself, you got to get ready for trial. You just don't know if this case is going to end up in trial. And it's important because you have to work hard for your client. And it's not that the moment you get some offer, you're going to jump on the offer and you're going to run with it. And you're going to say to your client, hey, here's an offer, take it. I present it to the client. If the client says, no, I reject it, I want to go forward, after I've advised them, if we have to go forward in a trial, I'm ready for trial. So when I take a case, I'm fully committed. I'm committed from beginning to end.
So I upload this commitment that you have, you just explained. But does that ever happen to you by taking a case which you think could have been easily resolved by you, however inadvertently something happens and then he switch it automatically, and you feel like you are in a limbo where you don't know exactly what the expectation is?
Oh, first off, your allegiance is to your client and your duty is to your client. But things happen. And while you may have all the good intentions, and I'm saying this generically for any lawyer, while you may have all the good intentions, sometimes you have a fallout with your client. I mean, this is a realistic environment that we're operating in. So as much as you want to do good, as much as you believe you can do good, sometimes you end up having a fallout. And when you have a fallout, you have to seek permission to withdraw from the case. I've withdrawn from cases, so it happens. It happens.
Ma rappelle nous, mesdames, messieurs, nous après recevoir un candidat pour poste et dans le département de justice pour Spring Valley, et côté que non lycée Vince Sykes, et les apprendre for judge as a judge of Spring Valley. So les explique comment que les gain expérience n'a font parler avec lui et n'a demandé exactement qui ça le porter pour nous avons adressé plusieurs points qui ont rapport avec Bagoni, côté que l'expliquer que lycéen ingénieur de profession et surtout les undergrad degree, après ça c'est un attorney en même temps tout les MBA dans administration, c'est et il a expliqué que il décidé prendre carrière ça de l'autre niveau par rapport avec et Jean voulait aider monde, il décidé prendre une sorte de commitment pour lui-même pour lui et pour lui avancer avec la carrière ça. Alors et nous sommes passés dans partie philosophie qui ça le gagné et lui montrer que et quel que soit case dans si l'état gagné pour lui et prendre lui faut que tu connais exactement que le cas résoudre que ça et ou bien quel que soit et quand il présente devant s'il connaît pas il pas le toucher mais en même temps tout les gain cas qui difficile tant que police brutalité de policiers parfois et il dit que lui vraiment et il comprend ça et surtout il pas peur et allant côté que pour pas discuter ensemble et avec quel que soit monde qui t'a mené la justice et pour être capable de plaider pour un cas bien déterminé bien spécifique et now my question to you you know being a judge is a big responsibility. How do you view this role?
Well, you know, you're right, it's a huge responsibility. And people's lives are at stake.
Exactly.
Depending on the type of case, whether it's a criminal or a civil case, but
in your hands as well,
and in the judge's hands to some extent. But you know, we there are ethical rules of conduct for practicing for attorneys as well as for judges. And as a judge, you have to be impartial, and you have to decide cases on the merits. So there can be no partiality to any other party. There can be no bias. And as if I'm elected judge, that is how I, you know, intend to conduct myself on the bench, which is to look at every case with an open mind, to be completely impartial, and to judge the case on the merits of the facts and, you know, the application of the law.
Okay. I'm gonna bring, like you said, you're an engineer and being judge MBA, so you have the business sense, you have the capacity of thinking, having the critical thinking, and sometimes quick thinking, right? So, what if there is a case that you have, and then that case in which you have to make a decision promptly? Unfortunately, there are no major, like you see the person is, let's say the person is not really guilty, but there is no proof or evidence to prove that the person is not guilty. So how would you make that decision? Because the person's life is in your hands, like at some extent, right?
To some extent.
Yeah. So what would you do in this case?
Well, so let me start by, you know, prefacing what you've said, that's a hypothetical. So we're talking about
hypothetically. So exactly.
So that's number one. Number two, you know, let's assume it's a criminal case. In a criminal case, it's a jury that, you know, often decides.
Yep.
But a judge can also, you know, stand in place of the jury. The defendants would have to waive their right to a jury trial, and the judge is the fact finder as well as judge overseeing the case.
Correct.
So if we take the example of, you know, a bench trial is what we call it, where there's no jury, the judge is going to decide, I will decide the case on the facts. You cannot bring in your you know, past facts or even experiences necessarily into the case, because when you have a case and when you have a trial, both sides present evidence. Whether you can admit that evidence into the record, that's another legal issue that has to be determined or litigated.
Okay.
But ultimately, at the time where both sides say we've rested on our case, now you have all the evidence before you, and that is all you can rely on, is the evidence. So you can't be sitting there saying, well, maybe I think he may be guilty. No, you have to look at what evidence has been admitted and has been presented at that trial, and you have to make the decision based on that evidence, and only that evidence.
So which means it would have been a big risk to to make a decision based on critical thinking? Or?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. I mean, I could say, well, I had a similar experience years ago, but absolutely, that's you can't do that. That would be cause for a reversal of whatever decision or mistrial, for that matter. Yeah, you got to look at all the evidence, and you got to decide only based on the evidence that's been presented. And just to add, you have to be fair to both sides. The district attorney has a job to do. The defense attorney has a job to do.
Correct.
The district attorney is prosecuting the case. They will provide evidence. You, the judge, will decide whether that evidence is admissible, and likewise for the defendant. So the judge is really there to help this thing move forward and, keep it on track, keep the evidence relevant to the facts. But at the end of the day, you got to give both sides a fair opportunity to present their case. And, if the district attorney does not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, then a jury is going to decide that.
Okay.
Right.
So what are the key issues you see facing in judiciary in Spring Valley, basically? The judiciary in Spring Valley, and how do you plan to address them?
Well, again, not necessarily having the view of a judge here in Spring Valley, but having the view of, a practicing attorney that practices in the Spring Valley Village Court. I would say, and this is not really focused at the court. I think it's focused at the criminal justice system, generally speaking, which is that I think, we do need more diversion programs, programs that people can seek treatment.
Okay.
Maybe it's not always that, defendants carry, if you're a defendant, you're convicted or you plead guilty, that's on your record, right? And so if there's some way to perhaps get the individual, depending, again, if these are first-time offenders, low-level offenders, right? It makes sense to look to see if there is some perhaps diversion program where the individual can also get treatment and get help. That's number one. Number two, I also believe that more access to mental health is also going to help. People being able, because, you may have issues, but just because you were not able to get, professional help, so now you find yourself in a situation where you've committed a crime. And so maybe to avoid that, it's having easier access. There is mental health professionals out there, but it's the access to those mental health professionals. And I think if we have more of that, that would help the overall, criminal justice system as well.
Okay. Now, to touch some of the key aspect on community and impact. I know exactly you're running you're running as a judge, and this is something that's very important for the community. So, how do you plan to engage in the community to ensure their trust in the judicial system? Since you say the issue can be generic, right? So how do you plan to engage with the community?
Well, again, if I'm on the bench, I have said it, and I'll continue to state that I will be impartial. I have to look at each and every case based on the facts, and I have to be neutral. I cannot prejudge a case, and I will continue to be impartial because, see, here's the way I look at it, right? I handle cases.
Yeah.
I handle cases in federal courts as well as in local courts, state courts. When I walk into a courtroom, what is my expectation? I'm representing a client, whether it's a civil case or it's a criminal case. My expectation is that the judge and the court in general are going to give each side a fair opportunity. There are no, no one has prejudged the case. The judge is not impartial, or the judge is not partial to another party. The judge is impartial. Because if I didn't get that, I would be truly disturbed. So would my client, right?
But how do you ensure that how do you ensure fairness and that impartiality that you
that's our code of ethics.
Okay.
That's our code of ethics.
Definitely.
So we have to abide and comply with our code of ethics.
Correct.
Because, while people may think, well, okay, I know the judge, but I could be on the opposite side and representing a client where I'm not the judge, right? And I'm expecting that this judge is going to be fair and impartial. And in my practice, over my 12 plus years of practicing, I've had no issues. I've felt that every judge gave me a fair opportunity, just as the judge gave the other side. And so I've really never experienced, sometimes you may disagree with the ruling, and if you disagree with the ruling, then you would do an appeal. So you have that option, you have that recourse. If you disagree with the judge could make an error on the facts, the judge could make an error on the law, but there's a way to
override that,
to deal with that. Okay. Yeah, you have to appeal to a higher court, in this case the appellate division, and they'll hear the case and so on and so forth, right? So as I said, for this system to work, it has to maintain a very high degree of integrity for the system to work properly. You need that. Without that, you have chaos.
In this case, do you know what steps will you take to make the court more accessible and understandable to the general public?
Well, I think explaining to defendants who come before the court their rights, they have a right to an attorney if they're going to plead guilty. You want to explain to them that they have a right to go to trial. They have a right, to provide evidence for a jury to decide on their cases. So yeah, you want to apprise the defendant of all their rights, so they are fully, aware and understand what rights they have in the proceedings.
Okay, so one of the my mic is giving me some issues. Sorry. One of the other aspects I wanted to address with you. So something called disparity, right? So do you have any plan to address disparity in the justice system that you think may affect like certain group within the community?
Yeah, I agree that there are disparities in the criminal justice system. I'd be lying if I said no, they're not. Listen, there are disparities. And, I take the first response to that and say, I would say majority of the time, it's not intentional.
Okay.
The system has just conformed to a certain way, or, over the years, going way back. And because of that, some of these things happen without us even really knowing it. But there are disparities, the evidence shows or studies show that, minorities perhaps may get a stiffer sentence in comparison to, their white counterparts over the same or sort of like a similar crime. And so there are those types of, disparities. But I personally, I've been in situations where I felt that maybe my client, and again, there's never any hard proof, because as I said, I really don't believe anyone is intentionally doing it.
Yeah.
But I do believe that the system somehow, over the years of a lot of, and also the other thing with the criminal justice system is also the lack of trust.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lack of trust that, people have when they go in and they feel that they're not getting a fair shake, they're not getting a fair trial,
exactly, fair trial.
But otherwise, there are disparities, and I know it's something that I think most people acknowledge, most practitioners acknowledge. It's not a hidden secret whatsoever, but I don't think it's necessarily intentional. I think the system.
So I know some cases like I know you mentioned it's not, sometimes it's not intentional, but like you can clearly sometimes notice it. Sometimes it's noticeable, and then the person or the judge, with respect to the profession, basically, the judge does it basically with the lady, and you can clearly see there are the lack of equality and the decision that's being made. So I don't know.
On a case by case basis, yes, but generally speaking, it's tough to draw that conclusion. But on a case by case basis, probably, But also you have to remember, as a lawyer, while a non-lawyer would be, looking at things perhaps in more of a superficial manner, as a lawyer, you're really looking at the case, what the defendant has been charged with, and so on. So we may come to different conclusions based on that. You may be seeing things that lead you to believe, but the only way you'd be able to deal with that is on a case-by-case basis. You'd have to take the very specific case and look to see, hey, what exactly happened. But you see, even then, I'm not too worried. Listen, let's say I'm representing a defendant, and I feel that there's bias in the rulings and whatnot. That's why you have the right to appeal. Correct. So at the end of the day, really, there's no harm, no foul, because you have the right to appeal.
I agree. So. Right. Since we still stick to the ethics, because you mentioned it earlier, like ethics and integrity, so what measures will you take to avoid conflict of interest and maintain ethical standards on the bench?
That's a very good question, because that squarely would apply to someone like myself who practices, and then if I'm elected is also hearing cases.
Yeah.
So you have to be very vigilant to start off with.
Okay.
And you have to go out of your way to really look at the cases to make sure that maybe it's not someone I've represented previously and so on and so forth. But at the very get-go, there are some cases that I won't be able to handle any longer if I'm elected judge. One other thing I didn't mention is I get to keep my law practice. So I get to still practice. But what that means is there are some cases I cannot take on anymore. The cases that go before the local courts, I would not be able to represent anyone on those cases.
Okay.
Because that's clearly potentially a conflict of interest. Conflict
of interest, yeah.
Right. So that's number one. I do a lot of, federal court practice, so it takes me out of that category of having those conflicts, because I do have a lot of federal cases. I also do a lot of personal injury cases, so it takes me out of that as well. And then I also do a lot of immigration cases as well. But yeah, there's conflict of interest, and if there is a conflict of interest, you have to recuse yourself. You, the judge, you have to step back, and I think it's the right thing to do, as opposed to trying to find reasons why you should, keep the case. I would just recuse myself. I will tell the parties that I don't believe it would be fair to both sides or one side for me to remain on the case, and you would just recuse yourself. Yeah.
Okay. So, je rappelle nous toutes, mesdames, mesdemoiselles, messieurs, nous avec un candidat qui c'est Sykes, côté que Vince Sykes et li apprend for George et Spring Valley. So, même qui branche l'émission ça, nous avons laissé plusieurs points importants dans l'émission, côté que on a parlé de community impact dans la communauté, et surtout comment li capable d'engager dans la communauté pour capable assurer par exemple pour nous-mêmes dans l'audience pour capable croire dans lui et dans façon que capable adresser et système judiciaire, et par exemple plusieurs cas dans le système judiciaire là, nous connaissons que et il est toujours pas facile pour yon moun comprendre question de inéqualité, par exemple inégalité et surtout c'est une il dit comme ça que il connaît que il existe mais cependant il est toujours assuré que il fait ce que de droit et surtout parce que si l'état même rivé gon côté que il senti que pral gon conflit d'intérêt l'a obligé et fait back dans question ça nous discuter plusieurs points tout qui ont rapport avec motivation et comme ça tout avec des points forts et qui et en ce qui a trait avec comment les et penser adresser quelques problèmes que le système judiciaire là a fait face et il était même mentionné que l'étape important pour lui-même et par exemple pour nous commencer et plus sensibiliser mon la question de et la question qui en plus qui fait face avec problème mental health et l'étape important pour nous adresser ce genre de problème ça et il parle plusieurs points et il fait mention de plusieurs points surtout et dans courtroom et leur dans salle de et côté que ou vient juger et impartialité c'est une bagaille qui important et il dit comme ça qui fait partie de éthique là code d'éthique et job ça alors et nous t'es entré dans la communauté impact là et nous t'es parler surtout et comment que le capable gain accès et comment que en pile monde capable gain accès avec question de et avec public général là et dans question de et décision qui t'a supposé prendre pour capable et adresser plusieurs problèmes qui que public là en général a fait face et en même temps tout et nous a continué avec l'interview et n'espérer que en pile monde n'a capable participer avec nous dans l'émission ça après que nous fini avec l'entrevue. Alors, to go back, I don't want to circumvent, but like, we don't want to digress. That will be the last thing to do.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure we catch up on our interview. And then so far, I'm learning.
That's great.
It's a process for me. I'm learning right now a lot
That's
from
great.
you, based on what you're saying. And then,
Right.
Given that we know like there is an issue that not an existing issue on the judicial system, but will you be able do you think there is a need for the judicial to be independent, fully independent in the accountability of the public?
Well, the judicial system is independent. I mean, it's an independent. The court is independent. New York, of course, for state courts and local and village courts, you have to be elected. So, some actually do appointments as well, and even here in Rockland County, some do get appointed. But I don't see a way out of it that you got to get elected to the in my particular case I got to get elected to the position, but it's an independent court system. It's not we're not beholden to any other sort of like department. I mean the courts have a hierarchy from the local village to the Supreme, right, to the appellate, to the Court of Appeals. There's a hierarchy.
It's a hierarchical institution,
right.
I would say. Okay. So, now, since at the beginning now, I mentioned it will be basically different key aspect to touch for this interview today.
Sure.
So, in terms of like personal insights, what do you believe are the most important qualities for a judge to possess?
Again, we're talking generically, but I think the skills, the understanding of the law, experience, and also a high sense of integrity.
Okay, so do you have any models in legal field?
When you say models, meaning
like your role model,
like role models, not anyone specifically, but clearly when you practice, you see how judges handle cases, and you some are very skilled and very impressive. Most of the judges I've been in front um, tend to be very, accommodating of the parties and will hear both sides.
Okay.
So you pick up on those types of skills, but I also think it's who you are as a person, right? You bring your temperament to the bench, and
Okay.
you want to be you want to be you want to have the right temperament.
Okay.
You don't want a judge that is losing pay.
In terms of that,
Right.
how would you handle stress and maintain basically a healthy work-life balance? Because let's say, especially considering the demands of the judicial position.
Again, as I said, I always start with the premises that you have people who, their cases and their lives probably hang in the balance. And so you, the judge, you have to maintain your cool. You have to maintain a level head.
Okay.
And I compare it to, a surgeon that's performing surgery. You don't want the surgeon, losing control,
Exactly.
right? So I think it's the same that, there's a high sense of professionalism that you have to bring to that job. And most of the judges I know, that's exactly how they operate.
Okay. Now, in terms of policy and reforms, what are your views on current sentencing practices, and are there any reforms you believe are necessary?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some laws that tie a judge's hands, and the judge cannot really come up with a different sentence, as far as a lower sentence. We saw a lot of that with the drug, crimes, and, in the past, a lot of the drug issues that came up where a lot of the judges were bound by a specific type of sentence, or a certain, number of years. But I think, judges need discretion.
Okay.
But again, it varies. Remember, at the local court level, I don't know if you know this, but local courts don't handle misdemeanors. Don't handle felonies. They
Yeah.
only handle misdemeanors and below. And misdemeanors, it's up, the penal code is up to a year. Maximum penalty is up to a year incarceration. People rarely on misdemeanors get, incarcerated. You'd have to just be a repeat offender.
Yeah.
So it's really the county court judges that handle, the felonies and therefore the longer sentences. So if I am elected at that level, I would not really deal with much of that at all.
So, do you think the court system can better serve the victims of this kind of crime?
Well, when you say
Like felons.
Felonies. Well, again, as I said, I think judges do need discretion, but the sentencing guidelines. That's a whole topic in and of itself. As I said in the beginning, I think looking for more diversion programs, because I believe that a diversion program can assist the individual, because there's a treatment component. Take, for instance, a DWI, where you can get this person into treatment and maybe they can learn something, and therefore they can avoid having a felony conviction on their record for a lifetime, if in fact there's some diversion program that they can participate in and that they're able to successfully complete. We already have those types of programs in place as I speak now. Many DWI cases, if they end up being, serious felony cases, there's an evaluation to see whether or not the individual is qualified or eligible for the program. And if they are, they give them an opportunity, and they go through a very rigid, treatment plan, where they have to show up in court, and it's a very strict program. Any missteps, they can get kicked out of the program. But this gives someone an opportunity to redeem themselves, and to avoid having this sort of like felony conviction on your record,
or to stop being recidivist.
Exactly, right. Recidivism, in that they learn something. You know, many times we make the assumption that everyone knows, but you know, some people, you'd be surprised. You know, I didn't know I couldn't be drinking and driving. I mean, you know,
those are basic,
some people are serious about
preliminary.
Right. You know what I'm saying? But some people, well, I thought maybe if it was just 1 or 2 drinks, nah, you cannot drink and drive, right? So, or people don't maybe understand, I can handle my alcohol.
The criticality of that.
People don't understand. So they have to be exposed, they have to be educated.
Exactly.
You know, and you could go through a program, it's even a year, if not longer, where now, and you're hearing other people as well. You're seeing how other people are improving on their lives, and you know. So I'm all for that, because I think sometimes people just don't know, as you know, unbelievable as it sounds, but sometimes people don't know.
So therefore, like, what is your stance on alternative sentences, options such as like rehabilitation that you just mentioned?
That's exactly what I was talking about.
And restoration, like justice.
That's exactly what I was talking about.
Okay,
is introducing some sort of diversion program to
That's
give the person an opportunity to redeem themselves.
So you wholeheartedly agree on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So for those of you who are listening to the radio for the first time, Radio Groove FM, so there is a way you can, if it's not our frequency, which is 87.9, you can also go to our website. If you tend to leave Rockland County, on www.radiogroovefm.com, or if you have an iPhone or Android, you can go either on Google Play or Apple Store. You just download our application, which is a Groove FM, Groove FM Radio. So there is a nuance, which is Groove FM Radio and Radio Groove FM. So we have a caller, I believe. Hello? Hello?
Yes. Yes.
Groove FM Radio.
Groove FM?
Yes.
All right, yes. I have a question for Mr. Sykes. Mr. Sykes mentioned that he had his own practice. Now, if elected as judge, would any of his attorneys, let's say in his practice, can one of his attorneys that works at his practice present a case in front of him? And if they do, would he recuse himself from the case, or is it something that he's able to do?
So,
conflict of interest?
It's a conflict of interest, and the answer to the question is no, I could not hear a case from an attorney, because it's like me handling the case. So the answer is no. And will I recuse myself? The answer is yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So the closing question that I have for you, because it's already 7:39. We've been here for the past
that's good
30 minutes, and I like the vibe that you portray. I like that. That's positive, and I really appreciate that.
No problem.
So, if elected, what legacy do you hope to leave behind as a Georgian Spring Valley?
You know, my legacy is really to give hope to the up and coming. You know, we all know, Spring Valley, how it's evolved. But I think if you look at, the minority community, we need representation in places of authority and government. And I think my legacy, if I was to pick and choose, would be to inspire young people to have the confidence to go after some of these positions in government. Because, what I encountered and what I hear a lot, so, in order to actually run, you had to first, get your name on the ballot.
Yep.
And
definitely.
in order to do that, you had to go out and gather a whole bunch of signatures.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what I heard was, older people complaining, just complaining. I don't want to vote. Nothing happens.
So therefore, what do you have any message to those voters you want to convey?
Yeah, I do have a message.
Basically, that will be considering your candidacy.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. But my point was that I hear a lot of them complaining, but I and when us adults, go on the, you know, complaint path, what do you expect with the kids, right? They're going to pick up on that as well.
Exactly.
And so I'm trying to inspire the younger generations, right, to have confidence that they can do it as well. And if they see someone like themselves sitting on the bench, that gives them some inspiration. So that's potentially the legacy that I'd like to leave, which is that people are inspired by the fact that you had a judge who looks like you, who is like you, and was able to uphold a high sense of integrity and carry out the business of the court in a very professional way. So that would be my legacy.
We have a caller
Sure.
that has probably a question for you.
Sure.
Radio Google FM, tout château, bonsoir. Good evening.
Hello, good evening. I am enjoying the show and the presentation. Good evening, Attorney Sykes. I
Hi.
have a question. Is there any mentorship program for teens or the new generation coming that will actually take over for us? We're talking about legacy. Our children that are coming. How do they get exposed to the legal system? How do they know? Do we have any mentorship program? And if we don't, is that something that you could start, or do we have money to put aside for our teens to know the system, to learn about the system? Not until you're getting in trouble, then that's when you meet a judge. You don't know who. There's some things we learn in school, and there's something is good to be exposed to.
I agree.
How are you able to help our teens get more exposed to that legal system? Thank you.
I fully agree. I think it's an awesome question. I don't know of any mentorship programs specifically here in Rockland County with the court system, but I could be wrong. Now, I do know that the DA does have a lot of internships. So like in the summer time frame, I know they have internships potentially with high school students, definitely with students that are in law school. I know RCC has a paralegal program. So I'm going to take your suggestions and see if potentially this may be something that could be set up, through RCC or in combination with RCC. But I fully agree with you that if young men and women could get exposed in the proper way to the judicial system, I think it has a huge benefit. And when I say in the proper way, meaning you're not coming in there as a defendant or whatever, but you're coming in there to kind of learn, just as you would do in an internship. I think that would be an incredibly wonderful thing. It'll inspire more people to pursue, law, pursue being a paralegal, and so on and so forth. I do believe law enforcement does have some program along those lines. So if you wanted to be a police officer, etc. But as far as like becoming a lawyer, a judge, I don't know of any such program. But that's a great suggestion, and I will, keep this one. I'll put this one down and see if I can follow up on that.
Bring it to the other level.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, where do you think the listeners can go to learn more about your campaign and your vision for Spring Valley Judiciary?
Well, so if I could address the listeners, what I would say is that you guys need to come out on June 25th and cast your vote. Let your vote count. Let your vote be heard. Because the person that I'm running against is not from the community, is not a practicing attorney necessarily, and is being backed by a whole group of people. I'm going to leave it as that, but it's being backed. And it's kind of obvious when you look around. Most people don't even know who this person is, but I think this person has been able to shore up support through a voting bloc that is going to back him.
So do you think it's going to be rigged? Or?
No.
Okay.
I'm just simply saying that if you know you've got... So where I'm going, my next point was I'm looking to the minority community in Spring Valley to support me because that's the only community that I know of that potentially could support me. Okay. So I'm asking you guys to support me, and I know many of you do support me, but support means coming out on June 25th to vote. It doesn't mean saying, I know Mr. Sykes, he's good, it really means coming out. You got to make that sacrifice. You got to get out there June 25th. I've spoken to some people already. This one guy came to my office today. He's like, Mr. Sykes, I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to vote for you. I saw your sign. I was with my son. I'm going to vote for you. So I says, okay, I'm going to just test you. I'm going to ask you a test question. I'm like, okay, so you're going to vote for me. I really appreciate that. Just tell me, when is the election? He said November. So I said, okay, you see right there, right there. I won't be there in November.
It's supposed to be June.
It's going to be June, right. So you guys, you got to keep that. We'll get to November. We got to do June 1st.
So you think they are kind of not indecisive, but like they mistaken?
They mean well. Listen, this whole thing, unless you're part of it, can be very confusing. Okay. So everyone means well. But you programmed, right? Someone was actually, hey, when are elections? You automatically you're just going to say November, right? You're not going to. But that's the thing, though, that people have to keep in mind, that this primary election, because there are 3 people running for that seat within the Democratic Party.
Yep.
And therefore there's a primary, and that primary is on June 25th. So please, I'm pleading with you, come out June 25th. I need your support. I'm coming to the community, and I'm pleading with you for your support.
We have in total like 5 people. You're the 5th one, right?
Who's running?
Yeah.
3.
Remember,
you have...
You're talking about the Democratic Party.
Yeah, but in the Democratic Party, you have county elections. The county, you have people running for the county judgeship position as well. But I'm running for local. I'm not running for county.
Okay.
So that may get a little confusing as well. But yeah, June 25th is the date, and I, really need the support of the Spring Valley community.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 7:49, and that brings us to the end of today's show. We hope you found our conversation with Sykes. Sykes, insightful and informative as well. So right now, if you have any question, ladies and gentlemen, si nous avons question, you can always ask. You can call 845-419-1825. 845-419-1825. So once again, I want to thank you, Vince Sykes, for joining us and sharing your perspective on such important issues, especially the community really needs it. So for our listeners, if you would like to learn more about Vince Sykes, so what would you tell them basically?
Sure. So first of all, Rutherford, thank you so much. Great questions. I really enjoyed my time speaking with you. And also, as I said, I want to thank Groove FM for having me on the show. For your listeners out there, if you want to know more about me, first off, my office is 95 North Main Street in Spring Valley. Secondly, you can go to my website, which is www.sykesandassociates.com, and it's got my info, my bio, and stuff like that. Or you can give me a call, 845-406-1386. Again, that's 845-406-1386. And I want to thank you all for listening to the show, and I hope it was helpful, and love to see you guys June 25th at the polls.
Once again, it was a pleasure,
Thank
Mr. Sykes. Remember, guys, your vote is your voice. So make sure to participate in the upcoming election. And thank you all for tuning and stay informed, stay engaged, and have a great night. So it's a weekend. Once again, I usually tell my people, but like I know a lot of people of yours are listening right now.
Yeah.
If you drink, do not drive.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're driving, do not drink. Okay, so this is what I usually say. We're gonna take a break before we can transition into the sport, and then once again, thank you, Mr. Sykes.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Village of Spring Valley, stand up. Dans la prochaine élection qui est pour faire Jukap 25 juin 2024 là, tout le monde Spring Valley, mettez-vous à nous ensemble, yon dit l'autre, et puis main en main, nous pral voter Vince Sykes pour juge. Yon avocat sérieux qui a plus passé 15 années depuis la prend défense nous, spécialement ça qui pi faible. C'est un vétéran US Air Force. Yon monde qui compétent et qui croit en justice. Village Spring Valley, besoin plus représentants solides pour sa fête ou doit faire pi bon choix. Al voter Vince Sykes pour juge Jukap 25 juin 2024 là. For the primary election, June 25th, vote Vince Sykes for Justice, Village of Spring Valley.